In a New York hospital, 1977, Robert De Niro visited a friend who just battled for his life and was now recovering from a drug overdose. That friend was Martin Scorsese. De Niro threw a book onto the hospital bed where Scorsese was lying and said, "You finally ready to make this?" That book was Raging Bull, an autobiography from the 1949 world middleweight champ. Scorsese replied, "The one about the boxer? You know I hate boxing." Scorsese makes the best movies about the worst people. Jordan Belfort, a stock tycoon who robs the poor. Frank Sheeran, a hitman who murdered dozens of people. Wise guy Henry Hill, who profited off the mob before turning rat. All of these despicable men inspired Scorsese enough to make a movie about them. And just like them, these films are grotesquely vulgar and extremely violent. It's no wonder Americans revere Scorsese as the greatest. He continues to paint the American dream in a way that makes it desirable, before ripping it apart with real-life consequences and sending the audience home happy with their safe 9 through 5. But Raging Bull exists in the other half of Scorsese's filmography.
What's bothering me? My hands. My hands? What that means? No matter how big I get, no matter who I fight, no matter what I do, I ain't never gonna fight Joe Louis.
While it may be about another toxic male, it belongs in a list with Silence, Last Temptation of Christ, and The Age of Innocence. Scorsese may not be famous for his art house cinema, but it's the side of him I've begun to love the most. Raging Bull is the story of Jake LaMotta, the Bronx Bull, a fierce boxer who went toe-to-toe with Sugar Ray Robinson in several legendary fights in the 40s and 50s. He became the world middleweight champion without ever being knocked out, while behind the scenes, he was abusing the love of his life, Vicky, before ending his working life alone as a stand-up comedian. LaMotta struggled his whole life with the mob, a guilty conscience, and with violence outside the ring as an abusive husband and brother. Raging Bull, like many of Scorsese's films, is the full life of a man. And this man's story of jealousy, atonement, and the battle for his own legacy. I always knew I'd make this video. This series actually started a long time ago when I jotted down what Scorsese taught me. Eventually, that idea became my Stalker video, which is now bigger than ever, and Tarkovsky has become one of my favorite filmmakers. But before I knew about Tarkovsky, Bergman, and Kurosawa, I watched all the Scorsese movies I could get my hands on. So now you should understand why I say fuck so much. Joe Pesci, yeah, fuck you. I'm a Scorsese fanboy, and I have no regrets about that. He taught me what film is. He gave me a film education at 13 with just 2 of his box sets. By the time I was 15, I had gone through almost all of Scorsese's and Kubrick's films, and I felt as if I was the chosen one. I felt as if I had just gotten my degree in film history. The orgy scene at the end of Clockwork functioning as a fucked up graduation party for myself. I thought I was the shit, and any other kid who had seen Full Metal Jacket or The Shining instantly became my best friend.
Hi there, my little droogies.
It was a simple time of unnecessary entitlement, and I owe it all to Raging Bull and Martin Scorsese. So I dedicate this video to him. May he make films till the day he's gone. At the heart of this video is an analysis of my favorite film, and one of Roger Ebert's favorite films, and of the film revered as the greatest film of the 1980s. It took some courage for me to make this video, because in a way, this movie taught me everything I know about cinema. It sparked my passion and transformed me into the person I am now. Now, if I had a 13-year-old child, which I don't, I would show them Lord of the Rings, Fight Club, Good Will Hunting, and if I'm being honest, lots of Naruto. Raging Bull would not be on that list. Every time I rewatch it, I'm confused on what exactly resonated with me at such a young age. This is a mature film with mature themes. I know a lot of it went over my head at the time, but still, it stuck with me. It taught me that old movies could touch my soul, and it inspired me to keep watching them. But what about the story of Jake LaMotta affected me so much? Well, I think there's a lot of different answers, but I'll start with the man himself. Jake LaMotta's life story is nuts. If you haven't seen the film, I'd recommend watching it before continuing with this video, where I'll be discussing the movie's events and themes in depth. Like many of Scorsese's films, Raging Bull focuses on the worst and best moments of Jake LaMotta's life. It's a rise and fall story of a middleweight champion. It's a romance between Jake and the love of his life, Vicky. And ultimately, it's about Jake's self-destruction and the loss of everyone he loved. After I finished watching the movie, I was inspired to read Jake LaMotta's autobiography. The movie starts after LaMotta's boxing career has begun, and it loosely implies some of LaMotta's history, but it leaves out some major details. I purposefully haven't seen the 2016 Bronx Bull film, despite its loving reviews, but I would be surprised if they leave out this detail as well. LaMotta admits in his book to working with the mob as a teenager. At one point in the story, he talks about killing a person. It's a significant part of the book and a major detail in why he felt so tormented during his boxing career.
I've done a lot of bad things, Joey. Maybe it's coming back to me.
Yeah, no shit. But that's not even the craziest part. Years later, after he won the championship fighting Marcel Cerdan, after achieving the goal he spent his whole life working towards, he sees the man he killed all those years ago. The dude is alive. This is essentially the climax of the book, and LaMotta, who had just accomplished his life goal of becoming the world champion, felt like an angel had saved him that day. He was a new person from there on.
It's over for me. Boxing's over for me. I'm through.
Now I understand why Scorsese omitted this. It would have taken the film an entirely different direction and added to its length significantly. But these details made rewatching Raging Bull so much more powerful. And that's when I learned something crucially important about movie making. Storytelling is about characters first, not events. Even though those parts of the story were omitted from the film, doesn't mean De Niro's LaMotta hadn't experienced it. When you watch De Niro's tormented performance, and when you consider how much De Niro cared about LaMotta's life story, you can see these details present in the mind of De Niro's Jake. The guilt of having murdered somebody plays into Jake's anxiety and his pursuit of affection in the first half of the film. And after he wins the championship and this revelation would take place, Jake becomes the careless version of himself that would go on to open a bar and become a comedian, laughing at his own guilty conscience that was now set free from the consequences he feared all those years. In 1981, De Niro would win Best Actor for his performance as LaMotta.
Robert De Niro, narrating.
He brought the character to life emotionally, but also physically. He gained 60 pounds to play older Jake. His dedication to the role was overwhelming, and his passion for the story eventually became Scorsese's passion as well. I believe the decision to make this film black and white has a lot of implications. First, the film is black and white because Scorsese wanted to respect the wish of LaMotta, who says in his autobiography, "If they were to make a movie about me, I'd want it to be in black and white." I loved reading this passage in the book and having that revelation. Secondly, I believe the beautiful contrast in the black and white represents the contrast of Jake LaMotta's experiences showcased in the movie. From his crushing loss to Sugar Ray Robinson, to the inspiring montage of Jake's wedding and successive wins, which breaks the black and white for one scene of overwhelming life and beauty. And since we're talking about beautiful things, I have to give praise to the score by Italian composer Pietro Masagane, whose angelic classical sound contrasts the anger and brutality depicted. Last but not least, Scorsese has admitted that the black and white was necessary for tuning down the scenes inside the ring, which, in color, were apparently too bloody for cinema. Let's take a moment to appreciate the 5 most awesomest people in the world, my Patreon members. If you'd like to be one of them, it's only $3 a month. I know it's not a lot, but it really helps make each one of these videos. And as a member, you get to help me decide on a video topic every month. If you want to know exactly what type of equipment I'm using, the links are below. If you are in need of anything and buy using my link, I get a small kickback, so thank you. Raging Bull has mistakenly been called a great boxing film, but it's not really a sports film at all, even though that's what I assumed going into the movie at 13.
Well, certainly that was one of the most damaging evidences of punching that you have seen in recent years. Come on!
I was shocked to witness a movie that used boxing instead as a battlefield for the main character's soul. Almost every time LaMotta steps into the ring, it's with emotional baggage. LaMotta is tormented by his own guilt and insecurities, specifically his insecurity surrounding Vicky. The love story of Raging Bull focuses on the relationship between Vicky and Jake, his second wife, and the woman he claims to be the love of his life. Though LaMotta is depicted as a misogynistic and abusive husband, there are moments in the film of intense tenderness between the two of them. These scenes represent Jake's deep love for her. In the beginning of the film, he's actually married to his first wife, who he doesn't seem to care much about. In contrast to his obsessive protectiveness over Vicky, it's clear his feelings and perspective of the two of them are completely different.
Oh, you don't? That's nice. I don't trust you when it comes to her. I don't trust nobody.
Jake really loved Vicky. Perhaps it was only a selfish, self-fulfilling love, but it was real enough to lead to the jealous hatred that fuels Jake throughout the second half of the movie. When he hears Vicky describe his opponent, Tony Niro, as good-looking, he pounds his face in.
You ain't pretty no more.
Jake soon becomes possessed by the idea that Vicky's cheating on him. He beats her out of suspicion and even goes on to beat his brother to a pulp for cheating with her, without ever having proof. The ring represents Jake's confession booth. Jake enters the ring with sin and insecurity, and the beating he takes is his penance. Jake was known as the Bronx Bull, not because he was a big hitter, but because he could take a beating from the inside without ever going down. There are scenes where he stands passively, hands at his side, allowing himself to be hammered. Every punch he takes is a Hail Mary. Raging Bull doesn't concern itself with the fight or with boxing tactics. It's all about fear and drive. Scorsese took liberties with these scenes, and he breaks all the rules of boxing films by staying inside the ring and being as close to the action as possible. Thanks to Scorsese's brilliant editor, Thelma Schoonmaker, the fights are spliced into many different shots that highlight the brutality of the sport, soaked in sweat and blood, and the sound of the fight adds even more intensity, splicing the roar of the crowd and unclear animal noises, and the exploding light bulbs of old cameras. These fight scenes are presented unlike any other boxing film, and they successfully convey the chaos of Jake's mental battlefield. Which is the point, I'd like to think. One unique tactic Scorsese used to create these mythic scenes is by changing the size of the ring. This makes certain shots incredibly claustrophobic, and others seem almost stretched out. Of all the times I've watched this movie, I only recently noticed this. I honestly think these are the most effective boxing scenes in film history, not because they accurately display a sport, but because it symbolizes the mental space of LaMotta with so much emotion and bravado that it's simply overwhelming. Roger Ebert says in his review of Raging Bull, "It is the most painful and heart-rendering portrait of jealousy in the cinema, an Othello for our times. It's the best film I've seen about low self-esteem, sexual inadequacy, and fear that leads some men to abuse women." I couldn't say it any better myself. I remember when the credits rolled after my very first watch. I just sat there contemplating what I'd just witnessed. I understood that it was a film about an evil man who did a lot of bad things, and in the end regretted the way he lived. I thought about all the things he accomplished at a young age. None of it mattered because his guilt swallowed him. It wasn't till LaMotta decided to share his story that he began to atone properly. I could only imagine the pain of reliving that story and sharing it with the world. I'm thankful for it. It was, in a way, a film that taught me how not to live. It taught me that jealousy could possess you. It taught me that family is too important to destroy. It taught me that humans are imperfect, broken, and violent creatures, and that living through love is better than living through hate. It was a perfect example of how a movie exists as a learning tool. After that point, movies weren't just entertainment for me anymore. They were a way to learn valuable lessons that I wasn't going to learn in school or from my family. Movies have taught me so much, and that all started with the DVD copy of Raging Bull. Noah, thank you for letting me borrow that. You will forever be a great friend. Also, Mom and Dad, sorry for watching movies behind your back all the time. I hope it was worth it. I love you. Scorsese and De Niro have said that during the movie making, they felt like they were creating this movie for themselves. They had no idea or intention that this film would one day be considered Scorsese's greatest work. In a way, they were making it for themselves. It was De Niro's attempt to save Scorsese's life, and it was successful in both its pursuits. Scorsese went on to be Martin Scorsese, and De Niro went on to win Best Actor. Raging Bull would go on to win Best Picture of the 1980s. Even though it did lose to Ordinary People at the Oscars in 1981, time has declared a different winner. Scorsese would go on to make Goodfellas, The Departed, Gangs of New York, Wolf of Wall Street. So many stories with lessons to be learned from anti-heroes. But if De Niro never visited his friend Scorsese in the hospital with an autobiography of Jake LaMotta, and if Jake LaMotta had never decided to share his story, would Scorsese still be Scorsese? Joe Pesci was officially done acting after his career wasn't panning out, and it wasn't till De Niro saw him perform in a B movie that he contacted him. It would be the first film of many that the two friends would star in. Pesci would go on to be nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He'd later win for his role in Goodfellas. Raging Bull taught me a lot about movies, but perhaps its biggest influence was the one it had on Martin Scorsese. Thank you so much for watching. You really don't know how much it means to me. Shout out to Atlas VPN for sponsoring the Film Informer. If you're like me and you like to watch tons of foreign films, having a VPN is a great way to gain access to more content online for as little as $30 a year, which is 90% cheaper than all other VPNs. And if you're using a free one, just compare the speeds. Just compare them. I hope everyone has a great week. I'll be back soon with more content, so tune in.